Hopefully all you stat nerds are as excited about this one as we are. Creighton Sports and Information Director Rob Anderson is going to join us to talk about his 25 years at Creighton, the College World Series, and pros and cons to being an SID at Creighton University. It's the Roll Jays podcast.
Heads up, it's the Roll Jays podcast, the voice of the Creighton basketball fan. With your hosts, Jimmy Allen and Casey Matthews. Join the crew and meet CU players, coaches, and a whole lot more. Now, the Roll Jays podcast. Here's Jimmy Allen.
Welcome into the Roll Jays podcast, brought to you by Pepper Jack's Grill, Pyramid Contractors, and Sign Innovation, Omaha. Jimmy Allen, Casey Matthews, joined by the one, the only, nationally ranked number one SID in our book anyway, Rob Anderson. Rob, thanks for being here.
No problem. How are you guys?
We're obviously in the dog days of the basketball season, much like yourself. You've been doing this for 25 years now, not to date you too much, but I want to ask about not just basketball in general, but the school. How has Creighton University changed the most in your eyes over the last 25 years?
Well, just the development of the facilities is most noticeable, and there's a whole bunch more to come with the Fly Together project. But, I got to Creighton in 2001, so virtually every facility that is near campus was not around. Morrison Stadium, CHI Health Center Omaha, Charles Schwab Field Omaha, the new softball field. All of those were not there, and certainly DJ Sokol Arena, the McDermott Center, the Ruth, the Sports Performance Center that's underway, the new baseball practice facility, like all that stuff was not was not there.
Sure.
So that's
or
a huge
thought
change.
of for that matter.
Yeah, I mean soccer was under construction, CHI was under construction, but I mean the other stuff was not. And then the other, I think, really noticeable change is just changing to moving to the Big East has just really risen the profile of the university nationally, athletically and academically. And it's in some sports, it's got a lot more games on television, and just you're more in the national eye when your teams are doing well, and it's probably a little easier to get nationally ranked because you have more opportunities to pick up some good wins and all that. And that's probably the stuff that comes to mind.
Well, you can tell you're a pro, Rob, because you're already taking my questions away. But no, I mean, I did want you to talk about that, the move from the Missouri Valley to the Big East, from like your job perspective, and there's more than you're not the only, SID on campus, but moving to the Big East, what changed in that role? Like what were maybe if it's even like logistics or whatever, but what were the big changes that you can point to that were the biggest challenges?
I've been around the Missouri Valley since 1998, so I was pretty familiar with a lot of those venues and the media and the other my peers at other schools where I was quite familiar, and you get used to the same hotels and everything. Not everything, but just about everything was pretty drivable. And I was traveling probably a little bit more with volleyball, since more of those contests were close by with Drake and UNI and Wichita, Missouri State, Bradley, Illinois State, things like that. So, I mean, it's that changed a little bit. Now it's virtually all flights for a lot of our teams, outside of maybe DePaul and Marquette, and even those are an 8-hour drive away. But then just like I mentioned earlier, the television, I mean, it used to be, 4, 6, 8 games a year were on television on either what's now Nebraska Public Media or KMTV. You hopefully would get 1 or 2 games on Fox Sports Midwest, maybe an ESPN2 game if you were part of the game of the year in the Valley. And then, the Valley tournament was great, and those would be on television, and the final would be on ESPN or ESPN2. And now I think you just assume every game is on television. This year it was big news because, oh my gosh, they're on ESPN Plus a couple times, and they're on Peacock, which is still pretty high quality production that you're able to see. And, you're paying, I don't know what Peacock costs a month, right? $10 a month, whereas in the past you were paying $15 or $20 for Flow Sports or a webcast package. So just that part has really changed. And, I think back to an example, like in 2014, the Creighton's first trip to Villanova as a member of the Big East with Ethan Wragge. That night he went crazy.
Yeah.
And, Villanova was ranked 4th in the country. And, like if Ethan Rogge hits 7 3-pointers in the first 7 minutes and it's a Missouri Valley game, it's not on national television. People like, oh my gosh, I heard Creighton had a guy that went crazy, but it kind of, the word of mouth picks up as the game's going on. I'm like, wait, Creighton's doing what to the 4th ranked team in the country? And all of a sudden by halftime, everybody's tuning in to see how many can he end up with. And, can Creighton keep this up? Whereas if you were in the Missouri Valley, I feel like, people might be trained to tune to ESPN first to look to see what games are on, but they know that, hey, it's probably going to be on one of those Fox channels or now there's a couple other television partners with the league, but people can find it if they want to follow your team. Even now, like I worked our women's game as we're taping this on Sunday, and it was on True TV, and I know that most people only go to True TV during the NCAA tournament or to watch Impractical Jokers, which I think we interrupted a marathon of. But like you can watch it. I realize that it's not NBC, it's not Big Fox, but it's on television, and they do a great job with they bring in a sideline reporter, and they're you're thinking that like we got Brian Anderson and Grant Hill and a sideline report. Grant Hill's doing the Final Four on CBS.
Yeah.
Brian Anderson has done the NBA Western Conference Finals, and he does Major League Baseball. I mean, for the playoffs, like these are some of the top broadcasters around, and they're doing regular midweek Big East basketball games. So we're really fortunate.
You mentioned the Ethan Rogge stats, and anybody that follows you on Twitter knows that you're an absolute gem when it comes to anything that's happened in the past at this university, and specifically with men's basketball. When we talk, do you have a favorite milestone that you've had to look up that you didn't know, or maybe a moment you've been able to be a part of that you've been able to document?
Oh boy. Sometimes you just like look stuff up, and it's you're thinking like, well, I bet this hasn't happened, and then inevitably it's like, okay, it happened 3 years ago. And then it's like, okay, it didn't happen in the last 3 years. Let's check. Let's keep going back. And all of a sudden you're like an hour into looking something up, and you're like going through newspaper clippings from 1976, trying to read a fuzzy box score that was, there's a blotch on it. And you're like, wait, what does that say? And then you read the article to see if something's mentioned. One that comes to mind, it's not really Creighton related. I bet you I spent 3 hours during the College World Series one day. LSU, this is probably 5-6 years ago, had a catcher, Mike Popersky, who he homered from both sides of the plate. And we were trying to figure out if anybody else had ever done that at the College World Series. And there was like 48 guys that had hit 2 homers in a game. And I mean, on my computer, I've got about the last 25 years with every pitch. I can tell you what happened. It takes a little bit of time, but then you figure out, okay, who did it? You can find their roster on the internet from the last 15, 20, 30 years. And there was like some guy from like 1950 something from Minnesota, and like he passed away, and like I found his obituary.
Wow.
The guy like had some connection to Creighton, like he had taught at Creighton or something like years later, but we couldn't figure out if he was hitting lefty or hitting righty. So then you start going into, okay, well, let's look at the guys that pitched against him, because typically if you're a platoon or if you're a switch hitter, if you're a righty, you'll hit opposite what the pitcher throws. And I mean, we spent like the whole rest of that game just trying to find that out. And we think that LSU guy was the first, and nobody's ever corrected us. So, I mean, I stumbled across something today that by the time this airs, I'm sure I'll have tweeted it, but I was curious. Coach Mack obviously has a great record against UConn, and 9-4, and with an NCAA tournament to Rhode Island as well. He's 9-5 against Dan Hurley. And I was curious, hey, how many other coaches have beaten Dan Hurley 9 times?
We'll get you back to the show in just a second, but I had to break in to tell you about our network sponsor, Home Field Apparel. HomeFieldApparel.com is your #1 site to visit for your throwback gear. I love their stuff. It's comfortable. It gives you that throwback, nostalgic feel when you wear it. I like wearing it around because I see the same Creighton gear everywhere I go, right? Not that it's not good, but I like something different. I like to stand out. So Home Field Apparel has you covered for that. Let me show you the site here. They just dropped some new T-shirts, some jackets with that throwback feel. You can see, look, the Omaha Civic Auditorium listed on these on these shirts. I love this jacket here. It's got the old school Creighton basketball logo on the back. So this is some of their new stuff that they just dropped. Look, it feels great. It's comfortable. You can wear it anywhere. Some hats. On our staff, Trey Ziegler has this jacket here, which I love. It's got the old school Jays with the basketball logo on the back. They just wore some jerseys with these patches on it a few days ago. So look, check out homefieldapparel.com. Order some throwback gear and stand out amongst your friends, amongst your peers. They're going to ask you where you got it. Tell them homefieldapparel.com.
You know, that's a lot. Dan Hurley doesn't lose much. He's a heck of a coach.
Yeah.
Well, the Big East has a partnership with Elias Sports Bureau, and their customer service is really good. I sent them an email, or I sent them a note, and about 15 minutes later, they sent me a chart back, and Greg McDermott has beaten him 9 times. That is first of all head coaches to have beaten him. And there's 2 guys that have beaten him 8 times. One of them, Ed Cooley, makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, Ed's been in the Big East a long time. Ed was at Providence, and Danny was at Rhode Island, so they went head-to-head every year, non-conference. And then the other guy, I hope you're sitting down. Casey, I can't tell. The other guy that's beaten him 8 times is Derek Kellogg.
I was going to ask.
Way.
We were just talking about that the other day when DK brought that up.
Derek was at UMass and
yeah.
beat him a couple times when he was at UMass. And, you know, and Rhode Island, they were A-10 rivals playing all the time. And,
wow.
You know, and I can't remember if he beat him when he was at Wagner, when Hurley was at Wagner, but, you know, the fact that 2 of those 3 guys are on the Creighton bench, I think that's kind of cool.
That is really cool. So is that like a common thing for you to do to reach out to Elias and just for like that information, or because it's always fascinating to me, actually, Rob, and I want you to answer my question, but before you know this, you might not remember me telling you this, but when I got hired by Creighton, Wes Offerman is the SID at North Dakota State. And when I got hired by Creighton, and Wes was one of my good friends there, and I said, hey, man, I just want to let you know I'm taking a job at Creighton. And he goes, dude, Rob Anderson is the best SID in the country. And he's like, you're going to love him. He comes up with the most incredible stats. Nobody knows like how he does it, but he's the best. So then I get here and I start to see it. And so I've always wondered, like, how do you find all that?
Well, really quickly, but Rob, before you answer that, Casey, I want you to know that when I told Rob I was bringing in this podcast, he said, why would you bring Casey on the podcast? He doesn't know anything about basketball. So we'll make it full circle. Rob.
But then when Wes said no, I mean,
there you go.
What's Wes know about the Big East, huh?
Yeah.
To answer your question, Elias, that partnership just started probably 2-3 years ago. I try not to bug them for a lot of stuff. Maybe 2 or 3 questions a week, because I don't want to have them do all my work. I want stuff that like I can't look up. Like, I mean, yeah, Dan Hurley's lost 140 some games in his career, and I suppose I could have gone down and looked at every single school and who their coach was and put together a list, but I knew that they'd have the capability to do that really quickly. So, and they've got a database that we've got access to that's got a lot of stuff. So if you see, you know, hey, that's the most in a 2-game span or the longest active streak, some of that. But there's a lot of stuff where I ask them to look it up once, and then once they get it to me, I take care of updating it every other time. I'm not going to email them every single day. Hey, send me the list of the longest 3-point streaks in the country. Like once I have the list, I update it every day. And it's the one with the team where Creighton's at like 1,081 games, I think it is. They're their 9th or 10th longest. That one's such a pain to look up every game, because every single day you're looking to see who played, did they make a 3 or not. And nowadays everybody shoots 25 threes a game. So you might get one school a year that drops off that list. And come like postseason time, it's always hard to tell. Like, when do they play again? Are they in some postseason tournament I've never heard of? Things like that. So that can take some time. But what I try to do is bring the perspective of, okay, if I've never seen Creighton play and I don't really know anything about them, which sometimes you get with these broadcasters, is what do I need to know? And then also like what achievements are within reach? And then also, like, what do these 2 schools have in common? Sure. And, you know, sometimes when you watch a game and they mention the same thing 100 times, and you're like, we know that Doug is the son of Greg. Like, we know that stuff. But, like, sometimes it's, hey, Creighton's trying to do this for the first time ever, or whatever. And it's, you know, they might have gotten it from my notes. They might have gotten it from somewhere else. But we try to be as comprehensive as possible, because I know other people, whether it's fans or media, are trying to find that stuff, and it doesn't always happen. It usually doesn't happen, but at least if it does, I can say, oh yeah, I think it's on page 2 or 3 of the notes, and here's a list, and they can look at it, and then they can write their own story instead of waiting for me to look it up at 10 at night when it's past their deadline. And, I'm on the road, I'm on a bus trying to get back to Omaha.
I want to go back to something you mentioned a minute ago, because I think everybody that's a fan of Creighton or has worked for the school or was at the school at the time of the jump to the Big East, there was the discussion around the Catholic Seven and what the group was going to be called, and then obviously the burdens of the Big East. Do you remember your first initial thoughts when the conversation started happening about Creighton making the move to the Big East? And as somebody that was there in the Missouri Valley, did you think it was even possible at the time?
I thought it was unlikely.
Sure.
I remember talking to Doug McDermott. We were playing at Cal, Doug's junior year, and it's like December. It's a non-conference game. It's the game that Jahens held Alan Crabb to like 6 for 1,000 shooting. He like Alan Crabb was in the NBA, made 100 million, but on that night, Jahens locked him up, and we beat Cal. But I remember we were at the airport, and it kind of was like, oh, the Big East is splitting up, and here's 20 schools that could replace him. And I remember Doug saying, like, well, I'm not going to be around. Just not saying he's not coming back for a senior year, but like most of the times when these conferences change, it's a 2 to 3 year process for all this to actually take place and the paperwork to get done. And it instead it happened. It literally like broke during our conference tournament game that March. They're like, hey, Creighton's going to get a big, like we knew there was a big meeting, and I won't say it. There's a very prominent national media member that tweeted that, hey, Creighton is not going to the Big East. Like there was a vote and all that. And he put the word not in there, and it shouldn't have been there. So he's 100% wrong. And like, I'm in the middle of the game. We're playing like Drake or something in the first round of the tournament. And I'm thinking like, oh, okay, well, I knew there was a meeting. I knew it was a possibility, but you never, it's not a certainty.
Right.
And then like, we play the game, we're doing the press conference, and like, as the day goes on, you're like, oh, this is happening. And then the day they had their meeting with all the presidents and all that, where they actually did the vote in person, was the day we flew to Philadelphia for the NCAA tournament. And we were on the plane, like watching the press conference there. And I remember we got all the media, because a lot of the media had flown out. It was probably a Tuesday if we were playing on a Thursday. A lot of the media had flown out that day as well, because they want to be there for the practice day. And we got Coach Mack and maybe Rass together in a hotel room at like 9 at night, because that's when our shoot around and all our practices got done, just so they could get a reaction of like, hey, what do you think? Because if you I know Casey wasn't around. I forget Jimmy. I don't think you were around then, but
I would have been showing up 2 years later.
Not in the media. Yeah, not in the media,
Yeah,
certainly.
yeah.
But like we did a big celebration at DJ Sokol Arena, where they kind of like streamed this Big East show with all the presidents, and like virtually nobody was around to like say, hey, this is great. I think Kevin Sarver was left behind for some reason, probably getting ready for some NCAA tournament stuff or something. But I think it was kind of like, well, thanks for coming, and here's the show. And like, we don't have a bunch of speakers and all these balloons and fireworks. It was just like, you could tell the excitement then from our fans. And, we talked about it a couple of days ago when we were at our game, about how like there was a time when our fans would be so fired. We sold out CHI when we hosted DePaul for a season opener in like 2007 or 8.
Yeah.
And people were fired up. And like, now it's like, oh man, Georgetown at 7:30. It's like, this is Georgetown. This is Allen Iverson, Patrick Ewing, like John Thompson. Like this is one of the historic programs in college basketball in the last 40 years. And it's like that, to think we're playing them night in, night out, and like, oh hey, now we're going to, this week we go to UConn and St. John's, just 2 top 15 teams to play on national television. It's quite a rise in the last 15 years.
I have to ask, and you don't have to name names if you don't want to, but like from an SID standpoint around the Missouri Valley, when that conversation's being had, what were the kind of the comments from your peers about the jump and like what you should expect, or their thoughts or anything like that?
I don't remember. I don't know that a lot of the SIDs, I think it was the feeling of like, hey, we might not be playing you guys much.
Yeah, sure.
I remember I remember Mitch Holtis, who, does the Chiefs and still does some Valley stuff. At the time was kind of the voice of the Valley. And he was adamant, he's like, in 10 years, I just get the feeling all these schools are going to be like, what are we doing? And they're going to be like, why don't we get a bunch of conferences that are much more geographically aligned? And there's still always chatter about that, but it's kind of going the other way where, you got Hawaii and North Dakota State in the same football league, and Sacramento State is in the MAC with UMass and football. And it's
Crazy.
it really is crazy. I mean, if you looked at it and said, hey, let's start over, I'm not sure that I would think the geography would be a much more important factor than it is. But when you're adding a team or two here and there and dropping a team, like it's kind of how it's worked out. And I think it's certainly benefited Creighton. And I think Creighton's one of the few schools that stands out that switched leagues to something equal or better and has still thrived. There are a lot of schools that have not been the same since they left in a lot of sports. So, as it relates to basketball, as it relates to volleyball, Creighton's been doing some things that they haven't done.
Was that a direct shot at Nebraska football, or are you just going to gloss over that?
No, I'm not talking about. I steer clear of football. We don't have it, and
sure,
I'm good with that.
Yeah, Rob probably loves that.
I can sit at home and watch every other football game. That's kind of a cool deal.
There you go.
No question. I mean, how much different is your job? I mean, I know this season we're hoping we can win the Big East tournament and still make the NCAA tournament. But how much different is your job in, say, December versus your job in March when we're getting ready for the NCAA tournament and Big East tournament, all those big events? Like what changes, and what would maybe something that like your average fan wouldn't know that you have to be on top of and be ready for?
I mean, instead of saying December, I would say January, because for me, I still work with our volleyball team, and they've been in the Elite Eight the last 2 years where they're playing into mid-December. So that overlap, which starts, when basketball starts, and now late October, that's a challenge because that's when volleyball's at its busiest. And that's when basketball, you're trying to get everything going, and you're always in these premier non-conference games and tournaments and whatever. So that's a challenge. But just in general, I think you're just prepping as the year goes on. You've got more stats have accumulated, and you're just you're getting closer to records. You're getting closer to senior day, certainly the conference tournament and NCAA tournament or whatever postseason event. You're on the road longer and for more days in a row. It's not just, hey, we're going here for one day and coming back. So that's something. I think the other part is that you don't realize until like last year when we beat Louisville in the first round of the NCAA tournament, where we were literally the first game that Thursday, is you forget how many different radio stations there are across the country that are all like, hey, we want to talk to Coach McDermott because we're going to talk college basketball all day. And hey, this is the coach that just won. And Coach is great with the media. And he might do one or two of those national things if given the opportunity. But you know what Coach wants to do? He wants to break down film on our next opponent, because winning one game is nice, but winning two games is even nicer, and all that. And you want to keep the focus. And he wants to be able to enjoy it a little bit and not just spend the next 3 hours on the phone just saying, hey, what a great win that was for us, and it's so great. And instead, you're trying to move ahead. So that's something I think most people don't realize. And then just, you've got so many more media that are on traveling with you that you're trying to accommodate, but there's national media, there's media from the city that is hosting the games. And then there's the opponent media, which sometimes is a factor if we play, North Carolina, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, we've got Harrison Barnes, they've got Doug McDermott. That'd be a cool storyline. Where all of a sudden, or, we went to San Antonio where Nebraska was there, and like in 2014, there's other years where it's just, there's like a connection between one school and another. And well, at San Antonio, Iowa State was down there too. So you had the Hoiberg, McDermott old school, like you had all that. Mm-hmm. So that's part of it. I think the other thing that maybe isn't exactly tied to what you're asking, but when Omaha has NCAA tournament games at CHI that they host, that is far and away the most challenging thing that we do. I've been media coordinator for a bunch of them. Glenn Sisk from our office ran the last one, but that is you could spend 48 hours a day working on that the week of. I mean, there's a lot of prep leading up to it, but we are literally, when you're hosting, you're literally watching the selection show like everybody else in the world, and all of a sudden within 36 hours you've got 8 teams arriving, and there are a million phone calls. Casey's been through it just on the logistics end, trying to get film, how many people are traveling? Are they having a pep band? Are the cheerleaders? What about our parents? Are the coaches' families going? All that, in addition to trying to get every single video clip of every team you're playing. I'm dealing with all the media. They're trying to figure out, hey, what time do we play? And when are you guys doing interviews? And I'm trying to get notes together. And you combine that with, oh yeah, by the way, there's eight cities that are hosting that first weekend. That is, to me, by far the most difficult thing we do is when we host that event. It's an outstanding event for the city. It's high profile. The whole world is watching, but it's not something you want to mess up. It's a really special experience for the coaches and student athletes that are part of it. For the fans, it brings in a lot of revenue for the city. But there's a couple dozen people behind the scenes that are not sleeping a whole lot to make sure you pull it off successfully.
You mentioned a minute ago before we started talking about the tournament that you obviously spearhead two sports, and you've seen 2 really big changes in your time at Creighton between those 2 sports, whether it be from Dana Altman to Greg McDermott or recently with Kirsten to Brian. What changes about your role when a head coach of a major program like those 2 changes? Is anything different for you from that spec?
It just depends on the coach. Brian, him being on staff previously with Kirsten, we already had a relationship where you kind of know, and there's little things that he does different or preferences that he has that I try to adjust to. With Dana to Mac was a little different just because I knew Coach Mac. I was actually, before I got to Creighton, I was in Northern Iowa when he was there for his first couple months. I wasn't working much with men's basketball, but I had met him. Someday you're going to have to ask about his press conference in Northern Iowa. It's the weirdest press conference I've ever been a part of.
The SID would have to get him on our show first for that to happen. Rob.
Well, in fairness to Rob, Mac has told us he's coming on. It's just
he might be a little busy these days.
He might be a little busy, and I don't know if you noticed, but it's about 70 degrees this week. So if Coach had any spare time,
he wouldn't be talking to us two yahoos.
Which he doesn't, because UConn and St. John's this week is going to be a handful. But yeah, I mean, just like you try to adjust to how they like doing things. Like Coach Mack always likes getting, hey, last 5 games for us, for our opponents, things like that. Some coaches are big on plus minus. Sometimes it's not even the head coach. It might be an assistant coach who's looking for something different.
Right.
And some coaches want everything I can find on every opponent, and some are just like, I don't care about the stats. I've seen it with my own eyes. Once I watch the film, I'll make my judgments. I don't care if you gave the kid 6 assists or 8 assists. Like, I know if he played well or not. So I think that's part of it, but just like little things. I mean, as a SID, it's really, I feel very comfortable with the teams I work with and the coaches I work with, that I generally think I know what they're going to answer, how they're going to answer a question. And it's not, hey, today Coach Rosen or Coach McDermott is going to be happy with the media, and the next day he's going to be yelling and screaming. Like, they're very even keel and very process driven of, hey, we just need to get better, and we keep getting better and better every day. By the end of the year, we're going to be really good. And to me, that's what's really impressive is the people we have leading our programs. Not only those sports, I work with our cross country, track, and golf teams as well, and those teams don't necessarily get as much publicity, but like, there's some really good people in charge that bring in great young men and women within the program too. So that makes a huge difference in my job, that there's not a lot of knuckleheads to deal with, other than some of the media like you guys. But
I was waiting for it. There it is.
I had to specify you guys because the others are perfect. But you know what I mean? Like, it just, you try to adapt just like anybody at their job. If they had a new a new boss or a new leader. Marcus Blossom wants things a little different than Bruce Rasmussen. Things like that you try to, how can we help reach our goal, or hit our target the best we can. And so it's just a matter of working with people and communicating, and that's really all it is.
And that leads me into one of the things I was really excited to talk to you about, and that is leadership. You are really in so many ways like the Creighton athletics historian, of the last couple decades, and you're like the mainstay. And when you look around of the leadership in the athletic department, you've been there through so much and so many people. And they talk about Coach Mack and his coaching tree, and he gets a lot of well-deserved credit for the people that are head coaches, and not only head coaches, but high-level assistant coaches that have worked for him. I didn't know Coach Booth. I don't know Coach Booth super well. I got a chance to be around her a little bit, and I was always blown away by her leadership. She'd be on my Mount Rushmore of leaders, of the people that I got to see kind of up close and personal. Bruce Rasmussen is another one that I've been able to see. What's the common thread? And I know it's a super hard question, Rob, but like when you look at some of these other guys that have gone on, to be head coaches or just like really successful in these industries, like what would you say is the key to being able to do that? Because it takes way more than just knowing your sport and knowing the X's and O's.
Yeah, I think all those people you mentioned, just they think ahead. They're not afraid to challenge and think outside the box and try to push the envelope a little bit. They don't, they're not as hard on me as they might be on a player, but the reason that they want the media coverage or this much better, just like they want their athletes to do better, just like they want their program to grow. They want the crowds to be better. They want, everything to be this much better. Hey, but we want to travel nicer, whatever it is. They're trying to grow every single part of their program. And Kirsten came in, all those people too have winning backgrounds. That certainly helps. You don't get to typically be a Division I head coach without a good background, but Kirsten will tell you she was 26 years old, I think, or 27 years old, and never been a Division I head coach. She was a head coach for 3 years at junior college, part-time volleyball coach, part-time human resources. Bruce, when he started, he was like, the coaching women's basketball. He was driving the van. He was helping out with the golf team. He was, they didn't always have an athletic trainer, so he was trying to figure out all that stuff. Like
things have changed a little bit.
I think things have changed a lot.
Yeah.
But I think those people, they communicate with what they're trying to get, and they point everybody in the right direction, typically, and then and they have standards, and they don't settle for mediocrity. They want to do better, and if it's a student athlete, they want them to come back, have a better practice the next day. They want to be better in the game the next day. They want to be better, when they return from their summer break than they were when they left campus in the spring. And they, you look at the strides that our student athletes make from year to year, and it's pretty incredible that they're able to motivate them. And then they also just, they trust what I do. They trust what our strength coaches do. They trust the athletic training staff. They trust the academic staff that, hey, that's your area of expertise. How can we make this better? How can we be healthier? How can we be stronger? How can we get better grades? How, like every little piece of the way. And they listen and try to incorporate that. Coach McDermott's not gonna, can't do Jeremy Anderson's job, but he noticed, hey, you know what? Here's some things that I feel like we can do better. He brings Jeremy on board, and certainly you'll hear a lot of great words about him and everything he's done, just as an example. And I think they do a good job with that. And then they're just great with people, with boosters, with everybody off the court, whether it's some of the people you mentioned, Bruce, Mac, Kirsten, all them, like they just connect with people, and Marcus is the same way. Coach Gannon, Coach Gannon isn't as visible, but he's unbelievable with people, with his teams. They consistently have top 5 GPAs in the country, and like they're recruiting kids that are like faster than anybody that Creighton has ever had in school history. So like when they get here, it's not uncommon that we're still breaking records left and right in cross country and track with the kids they're bringing in. And again, they're like 3.8 to 4.0 students. They're not fully funded and getting all the NIL money you hear about from some sports. These kids are doing it because they love it and they're academic minded and focused, and their team cohesion is just out of this world. And I think that's true for a lot of our teams.
You mentioned it earlier. Obviously, Creighton only gets to host the men's basketball national tournament a few times in a decade, but we host the men's baseball tournament every single year, and the College World Series being a big part of what you do. What is the worst part about that for you, and what's your favorite part about that every summer?
The worst part,
other than the long days.
There's not really a word. The worst part is rain.
Yeah. Good call.
I like baseball, and this is the national championship, the best 8 teams in the country. So there's not. It'd be like, if you guys are basketball guys, like, oh, we got to go to the Final Four again. Jeez,
yeah, sure.
Like you got to pinch yourself. Like just because it's a mile from my office doesn't mean it's not any less cool. You hear all these people talk about it's a bucket list item, and man, I got to get to Omaha. I got to get to a game someday. And then the people that come here think it's the coolest thing they've ever been a part of. So there's not a lot of bad things about it. Again, when it rains and you're just sitting there and you're like, man, I feel like the weather's pretty good. We could have played by now. But then, if the first pitch was supposed to be at 6:00, at 6:45, there's this huge thunderstorm, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, you know what? They probably made the right decision because we didn't want Paul Skeens to throw 2 innings and then you can't use him for 4 days. So so much of that is based on, okay, what could happen with the weather and trying to anticipate. Nobody gets it perfect, but and then what was the other part of the question?
Your favorite part? Yeah. And by the way, I hope it works out for that Paul Skeens kid, that baseball situation. I hope it works out for him.
Yeah, he's doing all right. If not, he's wants to be an Air Force pilot or something. So
sure. Your favorite part of being part of the series?
I love the games, but honestly, the day before the World Series starts, the practice day, they do like what they call a car wash. Like, again, it's a SID. It's basically the teams come in and they probably have 10 different media obligations they have to do, and about half of them are with ESPN or the NCAA website or the video board stuff where you see them say, hey, happy Father's Day or happy Military Day, or all the stuff you see on the video board where like, hey, let's meet our lineup, let's get on your feet. Like they tape all that stuff the day or two before the World Series gets started. And we're just upstairs, and some of that stuff we do in the suites, some of it we do down by the dugouts or other rooms around the stadium. But for me, I'm in the press box virtually the entire World Series. So like it's about the one time I'm actually interacting face to face with the coaches and student athletes, and just to see them react, and they walk into the suites and like they're drawn to the windows to look over at the field, and they're taking pictures. And these are guys that some of them are first round draft picks, National Player of the Year, All-American candidates, and they're just giddy as can be and can't wait to get out there. And at that point they're just like, hey, we need you to talk to, hey, you got a couple minutes, we want you to talk to Kyle Peterson and Carl Ravitch. And then they go from that, and then they talk to Laura Rutledge or whoever the sideline reporter is, Chris Budden, and then we take them down and we get them their fancy photos and videos of them looking tough with cool backgrounds and stuff that they can put on their social media. Just days like that, I find it's a little stressful because you're trying to take like 10 or 12 guys from the team and make sure that everybody's occupied, and then like, hey, don't stay there too long because we need you in these other 4 spots, and you only have an hour to do it. But a day like that is something that most of the public doesn't see outside of like, usually they take the team photo to start right outside the statue or by the statue. But to me, that's always a fun day that's probably most people don't know anything about.
That is cool. Rob, tell us, and this will be my last question, Jimmy. I'm sure Jimmy he's the best at asking questions. He could ask you 1,000 more, but I know I told you half an hour. I've already kept you over, but I want to know this. You see players, their highest, their lowest. And I don't know if people quite understand how much time you spend around the guys. And not just the guys, so I shouldn't say that, but also the female student athletes too. You're also such a big part of telling their story and kind of guiding them, the media, to the stories that are cool and that people want to hear. Tell us, it's hard to say your favorite because you've worked with so many student athletes, but just tell us one that maybe sticks out to you as like the coolest story that you were able to help tell and get somebody's story out there.
I was the baseball SID my very first year, but the story that comes to mind is baseball related, and it wasn't when I was the baseball SID, but it was during a time where our baseball SID was an intern, where it would be a different person every year. And again, I'm typically pretty hands off with it, but if it's a big enough thing, I'd get involved. But we had Pat Vendetti from 2005 to 2008, and I'm in case you didn't know, kind of a stat geek, where like I just find things fascinating, and there's not a more fascinating guy that you'll ever meet than Pat Vendetti, and ambidextrous pitcher who comes as a walk-on, coach service his freshman year, didn't want him to be a sideshow, so he threw right-handed his couple appearances he made, and he didn't do a whole lot. And Pat wanted to, prove his spot on the team, and he worked, and in the offseason he got really good. And then he starts his sophomore year, and he's pitching, and we're like, the games are on radio. And like back then we didn't have a lot of games on radio, but the first weekend was on radio. And like Pat threw like 3 scoreless innings or something. And like the World Herald wrote this thing about, how cool it was. And like Ed, I think, was just surprised. Like, how do they know all this stuff? I said, well, the games are on radio, like people are listening. It's kind of unique. This guy's coming in throwing with both arms, and you never, it hasn't happened in the major leagues in 100 years outside of Pat. And then Pat like starts I think it was his sophomore year, might have been his junior year, with like 20 straight scoreless innings. And like, he's no longer like, who's this ambidextrous kid? It's like, this is one of the best relief pitchers in college baseball. Mm-hmm. And his junior year, he had a streak of 43 straight scoreless innings. And we were in the Missouri Valley Conference final, and it's double elimination. We had lost. We had a situation where we needed one win, and we were playing Wichita State. They needed to beat us twice to win the title. And Wichita State beat us 2-1 in the first game of the day. So it was a winner-take-all game. And like a lot of baseball tournaments, you've gone through most of your bullpen and all your starting pitchers because it's, 5 games condensed into about 4 or 5 days. And Ed's like, okay, who are we going to start? And Ed was always like, I'm going to start my best guy, and he'll go as long as he can go, and then we'll go with the next best guy and see where it takes us. And he's like, I'm starting Pat Vendetti. And he didn't want the whole world to know. He wanted it to be a surprise when they get lineup cards right before the game. And Pat threw like his first career start, he threw like 6 innings, struck out 10, and we had like a 5-run lead going to the 9th. And our All-American closer, it ended up going extra innings. Our All-American closer didn't have it that day. We won in extra innings. Chris Gradeville actually had the big hit that kind of broke things open because we were down 3 in like the 12th inning, and then in the bottom of the 12th we came back to win it. But like that was one of those days where we're trying to figure out like, okay, who do we know from ESPN that we can call? This game's going to be on TV. Like this is a cool thing. And, we didn't know he was going to have 10 strikeouts, but like just Pat, I mean, this is 2000. We talked about how things have changed since we got into the Big East. This is 2007, Pat's junior year. And, he's a relief pitcher for an unranked Creighton baseball team. He's not exactly a household name, but like throughout the year, he was in Sports Illustrated. He was on the front page of the New York Times. He was on Cold Pizza. If you remember that, that was like before First Take. Cold Pizza was the show. There was a station from Toronto that came down to talk to him, and Pat and his coaches were good because they knew that Pat would lock in come game time. So like pitchers don't always do a ton during batting practice. So if somebody wanted to come out and do a story and it meant Pat, played catch 5 throws with this arm, and then, hey, I'm going to switch and throw 5 with this arm. just like, we're all sick of hearing the Doug McDermott stories and, hey, he's playing for his dad. He's a walk-on and this and that. Like with Pat, every single broadcast is like, oh, let me try to throw with my offhand. And, they throw it 3 feet and laugh about it. And Pat just and hey, we need to see your glove. His glove's got 6 fingers and folds in the middle. And it's, his dad traced his hand when he was 3 years old, faxed it to Mizuno in Japan, and they built it. And Pat was just so willing with his time, and he answered every question like it's the first time he heard it. And then, he finishes at Creighton. He goes in the Yankees organization. Very first game, he's in to close the game in the 9th inning, and sure enough, 2 outs in the game. The last guy he faces is a switch hitter. And the umps don't know the rule of, wait, does the pitcher have to say I'm throwing with my right hand first, or does the batter get to decide that? And if you look up on YouTube, like Pat Venditti switch hitter, there's this blurry clip because it's from 2008 it's literally a 10-minute, like he switches sides, so Pat just puts his hand on the other side, and the umps didn't know what to do, and they finally said okay, and it's incredible. But Pat,
wow,
was with the Yankees organization for 5 or 6 years, but then his last 5 or 6 years, he was with the Bluejays, the A's, the God,
Phillies
who else?
for a little while.
Dodgers, Giants. I mean, he was kind of everywhere. I didn't throw it the hardest, but he was as high character as they come, and just fascinating. Like we would literally track how many his stats with each arm by hand, because the computer program doesn't know how to handle an ambidextrous pitcher. So we would track like his ERA with his left arm and his ERA with his right arm and how many pitches he threw, and just I couldn't get enough of it. And the fact that he's such a great individual, he still comes. I see him on the road every year. He tries to hit one Big East game a year. He lives in near Peoria, Illinois, but he tries to come to one Big East game a year because he wants to see each venue. And I mean,
that's awesome.
I know you're not supposed to have favorites, and again, it wasn't even a sport that I dealt with on a daily basis, but like he's incredible. And we've had a lot of incredible people, and Doug McDermott for putting up with every single interview request I sent his way. That wears on you. And Ethan Rogge, we talked about his game. We started talking about Ethan Rogge in that game at Villanova, and sure enough, the next day he's got like 5 interviews back to back to back to back. I try to make it so that it doesn't take his whole day. It's like, okay, it's an off day for the team. Hey, can I grab you from 3 to 4 o'clock? We'll do this phone call. We'll do this sit down interview, and then another phone call, and then you're done with it. He's like, okay. And he gets done with his last interview. He's like, is this what it's like for Doug every day? And I'm like, not every day, but
just most.
But if I'm trying to promote the program. We're a Missouri Valley program. We're trying to get an All-American. It's a great story. He's a great player. And, we don't really want to say no to ESPN or Sports Illustrated or the NCAA or whoever's trying to cover it. When it's a pretty high profile organization, we're trying to get our name on the map, and you hope for days like that. So, again, I think I see Doug now and he just walks away. Like we get along great, but I try to go out of my way to not ask him for things because he's more than done his share of stuff. And, there's hundreds of athletes that I've worked with that are good. What people don't realize, I think this goes back to one of your other questions, is like when you guys were in college or 18 to 22 years old, like the last thing you want to do is speak at the front of your class.
Yeah.
And, and like, hey, can you go give a speech on whatever, the government or history or whatever topic? And here instead, like part of my job is 5-10 minutes after a game ends, we're asking these 18 to 22 year olds like, hey, can you come give a speech? Except we're going to have a bunch of cameras and people asking you tough questions.
And it's all about you.
And if you say the wrong thing, every fan's going to get on social media and say, wait a second, he didn't mention this teammate. Oh, he said this. I think that means he's not happy, or he thinks he should be playing more. He's going in the transfer portal, or he's upset at the coach, or he's blaming the ref or whatever. And like, when you win and you hit the game-winning shot, it's one thing. Right. And you want all the attention, but like you don't win every game you play. And there are times where there's really tough moments, and our guys and our coaches have my back on that. And Coach Coach McDermott is unbelievable. He literally finishes the speech of, hey, this is what we need to do better. Here's what we're going to do to get ready for the next game. And then it's, Rob, who do you need? And I will say, hey, we're going to have Jimmy's going to go to radio. Casey's going to come with you, coach, to the press conference. And then we walk down the hall or walk to the court and
do you normally have that predetermined, or how does that kind of get decided?
Yeah, we usually try to kind of get an idea from a couple media members. And then we've got to kind of coordinate it because, if the writers and television people want the same people John Bishop does, like, that doesn't always work. So we try to give John Bishop somebody that only does radio. And then at home, we try to give one of the guys that goes from the press conference to radio, because coach will stay behind and answer his part of the question. So usually coach gives a statement for 90 seconds or so, just his overall evaluation of the game. Then we do about 5 or 6 minutes with just the athletes, and then we do another 6 or 8 minutes with coach. So again, when you're winning, there's a lot of times where it's, gosh, we could have chosen 6 different guys,
right?
Yeah.
But when you're not winning,
a little harder.
And you don't want the same guy every single game. You don't want the same guy every game, every time you lose. But some guy and some guys are better interviews than others. But like, you try to not, you don't want people's feelings to be hurt.
Yeah.
But some guys don't like doing it, and we try to work with them too. We try to make them more comfortable. We've had, whether it's myself or others, have come and presented to the team at the start of the year just with ideas, and try to make them more comfortable. And sometimes we'll do mock interviews just to get them familiar with what might happen. But there's still no way to simulate, hey, you lose a game in the Elite Eight on a call in the last second of the game that you might not agree with. And our guys got asked, there's a half hour of media that you got to do. And I was pretty proud that, you didn't see our guys saying, hey, that was a terrible call, or whatever feelings they might have thought privately.
That's John Bishop's job.
It was sometimes, but it was, hey, the game wasn't decided on that. It's a tough job. Like, we let them know that, hey, you guys can't talk about the officiating. But there are times where we all have seen press conferences where coaches or athletes don't follow that edict. And, I thought our guys stuck together, and probably one of their, lowest and toughest losses they're ever going to take, because what was ahead of them. But, our guys stood up to it and did it that day. And it's not easy by any means. And I can see Casey's, I didn't mean to bring you back to that, but
no, it's
a tough memory. And, again, this is 10 minutes after the game ends, and there's people with cameras in your face, and they want to know why did you do this play that didn't work when I would have done something else, or, like, whatever questions you get. And sometimes it's, hey, we know you just lost, but are you coming back next year? Or are you going to go to the draft? Or are you going to go to the transfer portal? And it's, these kids like haven't even processed, like, wait, how did we even lose the game? Like, we had it. And all of a sudden they're getting asked life-changing questions.
Oh,
and it's a tough deal.
It's funny though too, Rob, because you're talking about this and Mac's deal with Rob, who do you need? And that game in particular, a lot of people have seen it. They've seen the Mac's speech in the locker room after that game, and really, it's still like it was yesterday for me. And from the call to the way it ended to then go in the locker room. But I think what you just said is really interesting, because it went from
that's
guys,
how the speech ends.
Well, guys' heads in their hands, crying because we just lost a game. We're a basket away from going to the Final Four. Mac's telling them how proud he is of them, and then it's over, and it's, okay, Rob, who do you need? And now these guys that are just, their dreams got crushed are now having to go and stand with microphones in their face. And I think you just made a really good point that sometimes we need to give people a little bit more grace than we do. and also probably a little more praise than we do for handling those moments like professionals.
We put out the video in 2004. The first one I can remember us doing is 2014. We lost to Baylor by 30. Doug, Ethan, Grant, Jahan's senior year. We had a CBS film crew following us around that whole postseason, and they did great work. And we knew that, hey, they were in there, and we're probably going to air some of it or whatever. But it was just such a great message, and it was like you said, it's a, hey, we're proud of you, and hey, Grant, I've been recruiting you since you were in high school, and you were at Gonzaga. I wanted you at Iowa State, and then you went to Gonzaga, and then I'm so glad you're at Creighton, and I'm glad we got an extra year together. And Jahen's and you committed to Dana, and then a week later Dana leaves, and Ethan, you were already here, but you took and Doug, you're my son, but you had one of the great career. Like, I can recite that speech now, and it's just you see so much of the celebrating and the teams jumping around, spraying water and whatever, acting silly, that you forget that the other locker rooms just crushed, like you said. And with that San Diego State game, I think it was Andrew Grieve was doing our video then, and he filmed it, and I think he's said, look, hey coach, I know it's a tough moment, but here's what I've got in case you want to put it out. And he goes, did I say anything stupid? No. He goes, I thought it was a good message. He's like, go with it. Like, he just completely trusts, going back to, hey, let the strength coach do their job, let the video guy do their job. And it was an unbelievable message. It's one of the most visited videos we've ever put out. Those two, the Baylor game and the San Diego State game, outside of anything Kobe Parse related, when all the Philippines tuned in, like those two videos are as popular as anything we've ever done, and it's after a loss, and it's devastating. And I've watched that San Diego State one, I bet you 50 times through the years, and it puts me on the verge of tears every time. But you remember how special that group was, how close we were, and everything like that. And it's Coach McDermott is so good with people, with his messaging. This past 10 days has been really tough on the whole program, and Coach Mack too. Like, it's not just, he wants to win games, but he is treating Josh like he's his father, like Josh's father is alive and everything's, but they're going to have hard times, and he wants to make sure that everything is being done for Josh, and trying to make sure that he's in a good spot. And it's great life lessons for our guys, that many of them haven't been through it before. And he is making sure that is a priority, making sure that there are arrangements so that the whole team can get to the funeral, and everything else. And, he wants to win basketball games. He's as competitive as anybody. But at the same time, there's some big things going on in life that you got to pay heed to as well. So that's, just to see what the last 10 days have been like. Nobody certainly wants to go through it, but the way it's been handled, I mean, I couldn't speak high enough on how him and really everybody throughout the athletic department and the whole community has supported Josh and everything else to go with it.
Makes you proud to be a fan of the team.
Casey mentioned I've got about 50 more questions, but we get to talk to you all the time, so I don't need to ask them here. I just want to give you a thank you, because you mentioned how cool it is to be able to go to the College World Series and be there for that moment. For anyone that doesn't know, we sit at the home games for for Creighton games. We sit up in the hockey box at the very top of the building. And Rob, I don't think I've ever told you this story. When we went to the Sweet 16 3 years ago, Alex and I just assumed we'd be sitting in the hockey box as well, and we walked over and thanked you for helping us get it arranged to be at the Sweet 16. And you said, don't worry about it, I'll get out of your seats. And we looked down, our nameplates were right at courtside. We had no idea that's where we were sitting. And I don't know if you could tell by the look on Alex's face that he didn't know, because his eyes were about the size of a basketball. But absolutely one of the coolest moments of my life. And I just want to thank you for that.
Well, I again, the host school is the one doing all that stuff. And I think in that case, it helped that Alabama lost. And
sure.
Creighton and San Diego State aren't exactly a big deal in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah,
as much as you'd think.
No, this was in Detroit against Tennessee. This was in Detroit against Tennessee.
Oh, yeah.
We lost that one, but yeah.
I'm trying to think. what was the other game?
Purdue and Gonzaga.
Gonzaga, yeah. Now I'm glad it worked out. Again, like we could.
Yeah, it makes two of us.
We send them our list, and then they go through, and there's all these rules of, hey, every seat at every site is predetermined of, okay, this is where the national radio goes, this is where CBS goes. Then we've got 2 seats for national media. Then we've got the best team that's in our pod. This is where their radio goes, and they're across from their bench. And then we got more local media. Like, it's all predetermined. And again, the fact that you made the trip, sometimes it works out. It was
greatly appreciated.
Well, I'm glad you got to see it. I wish there was a better result.
I'm sorry you had to yell at me during that trip too. We'll make sure that doesn't happen again.
I can't remember what that one was.
Jimmy was cheering, apparently.
I was cheering, and John Bishop was standing next to me, so it was very difficult not to when he was getting hyped. So that's on me. 100% my fault.
That's about rule number 1. No cheering in the press box.
I honestly didn't even realize I did it till you came over and said something. But again, all my fault. I own it. It was 100% on me. Rob, we appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to do it with you. I'm sorry Casey lied to you and told you it was only going to be a half hour. We hit 58 minutes because this
is awesome. This is so fun. Rob, you said you're not supposed to have favorites, but we're going to break that rule too because this is that you're our favorite. So thank you so much.
You must not do a lot of episodes, or you spent too much time talking to Jeff Vanderloo or something. But we love Lou. I'm kidding, but glad I can help you out. And thanks again for covering our student athletes and coaches and teams across the board, and just your support of the Big East is helping cover the whole league. And I know you guys are kind of on the cutting edge, trying to get every other school involved, and it's good. Ultimately, it's generally pretty good for the league. So glad it worked out.
That's Creighton SID Rob Anderson. Join us here on the Roll Jays podcast, brought to you by Pepper Jack's Grill, Pyramid Contractors, and Sonovation. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Why you need to try Pepper Jack's Grill, the best Philly cheesesteak in America. At Pepper Jack's Grill, we craft your Philly just the way you like it. Fresh ingredients, sizzling on the grill, and endless customization options. Not just Phillies, we've got rice bowls, burritos, nachos, and even vegetarian choices. And don't forget those crispy fries with our famous spicy ranch. With 10 great locations in Omaha, there's a delicious meal waiting for everyone in the family. Pepper Jack's Grill, your Philly, your way.
At Pyramid Contractors, we do it all. From repairing or replacing your roof to updating siding, windows, or gutters. When you have a home improvement project, call Pyramid Contractors.
Pyramid